Hey everybody, I'm Ethan James with Carpenter.com. A few weeks back, I ran a video about using quickset mud instead of bucket mud, which I think is the best option all around for small drywall and plaster repairs. In that video, I teamed up with my friend Philip LaMachio, a plaster repair expert, and we had mentioned that we'd be doing a new video shortly about how to do the fastest plaster repairs imaginable. That's what we're covering here today. Philip uses pro-level techniques to repair divots and gouges in plaster in mere hours. We're going to show you several of those techniques in this video. They're tricks that will completely change your plaster repair game. But keep in mind that Philip also runs an online plaster repair resource website where he teaches people the ins and outs of the plaster trade, from the manual techniques involved, even to the business side of things. He trains both pros and DIYers through video chats, phone calls, and online materials. It's an incredible way to learn this highly lucrative trade, and Philip is a great teacher, so be sure to visit his website and contact him for more information. He'll give a quick hello at the end of this video. But for now, we're going to show you how to carry out the world's fastest plaster repairs. I'm Ethan James with Carpenter.com. Let's get going. These are the types of gouges and divots that we're going to focus on repairing in this video. Notice that they're pretty sizable, but not too deep. You'll see this problem a lot in plaster walls, which are prone to pitting and cracking. Keep in mind, many of these techniques will also apply to small drywall mud repairs, where the handiwork involved is pretty similar, but Philip focuses exclusively on plaster repair, so that's what we're going to address here. In the quick setting mud video, we showed how to mix small batches of hot mud in a mixing pan. Be sure to check that video out for a full explanation. But, as a quick recap, remember that you want to start with a little water in the bottom of your pan. Then you want to put quickset powder on top of the water and slowly mix the two together with a knife or small trowel. For most repairs, you want a consistency about like peanut butter. But to fill a couple deeper gouges here, Philip is actually going to use less water and create a mixture even thicker, almost like the density of ice cream. This mix is going to dry faster, and because it's thicker, it'll hold its shape better, so it won't sag on the wall. For his initial coat, Philip wants to fill in these divots, so he goes with a 6-inch knife. You really don't want to use anything smaller than this because it'll just leave carve marks in your compound. As for applying it, pay attention to this simple technique. Philip loads up the knife and hits the divot from two different angles. That's one swipe down and across, then another swipe from the other direction. This forces mud into the little corners on both sides of the divot, which is really important because it prevents bubbles and gaps. You want to get the gouge completely filled on the first coat. Also, he's careful not to leave large ridge lines or stroke marks, which would have to be sanded between coats. But we're not going to sand between coats because we're using fast set compound. In fact, this first batch we're using is 5-minute mud, which is a very limited work time. For new DIYers, this will probably be too fast. Even a 20-minute mud might be too fast for you, so you may want to start with a 45-minute compound. But Philip uses these lower numbers because it's going to speed up every phase of the repair to come. This is how you do extremely fast plaster repairs. Careful knife work and quick setting mud get your first base coat on fast and harden in often less than 15 minutes. A phase that takes many people several hours or even a day is really knocked out in no time. From here, Philip goes and cleans off his tools and his pan with water and a sponge. You don't want that mud to set in the pan, it'll get stuck. But the 5-minute mud is setting up on the wall right now. Just in the time it takes to get everything clean, that first coat will mostly harden. Philip doesn't even bother looking at it. He just goes right ahead and starts mixing up his next batch of mud. At this point, he switches over to a higher number, the 45-minute compound. Working time is a little less important here because we're going to forcibly speed up the drying process later. But I'll point out, this is the last coat Philip intends to put on. He won't even need additional coats. This is just a topping coat. And this one will start with a slightly different texture. He's looking for a consistency similar to yogurt as he mixes this batch. He wants it a little softer and easier to spread. So he puts a slightly higher volume of water into the mixture, and he doesn't overmix it. For application, he also switches over to a larger knife, 10 inches or 12 inches. This because for topping coats, you want your second patch to be much larger than your first. You want it to reach out farther and completely cover that area. It's even more important on this coat to not leave high ridge lines too. You want a flat patch with no contours, which you accomplish with good knife work. Notice Philip takes extra care to feather the edges, leaving the perimeter as thin as possible to create a smooth transition to the existing wall. But he also doesn't want to scrape so hard that he takes all the material out of the center, We need a slight, thin buildup to have a quality coat. So don't gouge or scar either of your coats with the corner of your knife while you're doing this. The other thing that can go wrong is when a paint chip or a piece of grit comes off the wall. It gets on your knife, you drag it through the mud, and it leaves one of these streaks. You have to pull out that little piece of grit and trowel that area back into place. So make sure foreign objects don't get into your mud. And notice again that Philip doesn't overwork anything. He just gets it to a uniform smoothness with feathered edges, then moves on to the next one. In maybe just 5 minutes, he's got his second topping coats on. All told, he's probably spent 15 minutes so far in these patches. At this point, Philip could walk away and let the topping coat dry up so he could sand it. But again, this video is about doing the world's fastest plaster repairs, so we're going to show you how to speed things up even more. When experts like Philip want to knock out full repairs quickly, they often use a heat gun to quicken the drying process. Philip has an older one here, but these guns are like souped up hair dryers. They produce a current of air that can reach up to 1100 degrees. When directed at the wet compound, it'll begin to dry it out in no time. But these heat guns can be very dangerous. They can start fires if you're not careful, or they can damage the wall, causing paint and mud to blister and crack, and that's not going to help anything here. So Philip makes sure to keep the tip of the gun at least a couple inches away from the wall. If he has the gun on a high setting, he might even hold it back a little bit further than that, and he keeps the gun moving side to side to prevent heat buildup. When he works an area with the gun though, it begins drying on the spot. It'll turn from dark gray to bright white, and it'll take on a hard, porous texture. So when an area is dry, Philip just keeps the gun moving along to work the other areas. The feathered edges will dry out very quickly because they're so thin. But the center of the gouge repairs are deep, and they have a lot more moisture in them. So even after you hit a spot, you'll sometimes see the dark moisture bleed through again because it's not totally dry yet. You can keep coming back to these areas to heat up that excess moisture with the gun. Or you can do this whole process in between coats. So after your first gap filling coat, you can go ahead and use the heat gun on the area, then apply your next coat and do it again. Whatever the case, as mentioned, just be careful with the heat gun. Don't point it at anybody, don't point it at yourself. Don't set it down on wood or carpet or anything flammable. The nozzle will be very hot, like hot enough to scorch things. Put it on something heat resistant or hang it up by the little hook until it's cooled down. It's important to note that Philip still hasn't done any sanding yet. Just knife work and fast setting mud and fast drying techniques. But now that the topping coat is dry, it's finally time to tackle some sanding. Philip doesn't like using drywall sanding paddles though, because he feels they can leave scars in the compound from careless pressure. Instead, he just gets a large square of 120 or 150 grit sandpaper and cuts it into smaller strips. He then folds one of these strips until it's tripled up. Holding that sandpaper by hand, Philip gently passes it over the dry patch in circular sweeping motions. He's mostly focusing on the feathered edges. He wants to buff them down until they make a perfectly smooth transition with the wall. Then, when the perimeters are smooth, he works lightly across the deepest parts of the patches at the center. But because he was careful with his mud application, there really isn't too much to sand here. Philip takes care of this whole patch in about 30 seconds. This is especially important because quick setting mud is a little harder to sand than bucket mud. So, the less sanding effort you have to put in, the better. And it creates far less dust, which is a major bonus. After that, that area is done. That's a whole plaster repair patch in really about 20 minutes total. And this area is dry, completely smooth, and ready for primer. So that's it. That's how you carry out the world's fastest plaster repair. All it takes are the most basic drywall and plaster tools, some quick set mud, and possibly a heat gun, though that's optional if you want to just swap it out for more drying time. I'll link a number of these tools in the description. Drywall tools tend to be very affordable and they last forever if you keep them clean and dry, so they're great tools to have around. I want to thank Philip again for teaming up with me for these videos. He's an extraordinary plasterer and teacher, and again, he's now sharing his expertise with people through his website and online service. It's an amazing resource for DIYers and pros. So before we sign off, I'll let Philip tell you more about it himself.
Hi, this is Philip with the American School of Plaster Restoration. If you've enjoyed some of the tips that you've seen on these videos, you can learn more by going to our website. You'll see the link in the description. But right now we've got a really great deal. 3 months for free. All you do is sign up for the plan and you're going to have access to the forum, you're going to have access to the videos, and also my written manual, The Ultimate Guide to Plaster Restoration. You can read that and start to get some of the background understanding so you can really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. So like I said, right now we have this great 3 months free. You just go in, sign up for that. You're gonna have to put some credit card information in, but on the 4th month, if you don't want to pay for anything, you just unsubscribe. So, we'll look forward to seeing you there. Follow the link down below. Take care. Bye.